Live now to Adelaide, where Foreign Minister Penny Wong is speaking.
Overnight, the Israeli Defence Force made public details of its investigation into the strikes which killed 7 humanitarian workers in Gaza, including Zomi Frankcom. The Australian Government has made clear our expectations. We expect full accountability for her death and for the passing of the World Central Kitchen colleagues who also perished with her. We believe these deaths are utterly inexcusable, and clear practical action is needed to ensure this tragedy is never repeated. We have made clear, after we were verbally briefed, that we have not yet received sufficient information to satisfy our expectations. The Deputy Prime Minister and I wrote to our counterparts overnight to reiterate Australia's expectations. In that letter, we raised Australia's concerns that Israel at that time had not yet taken appropriate action in relation to the individuals involved in that incident. We acknowledge, since we sent the letter, Israel has now confirmed that 2 individuals involved in this incident have been stood down. We reiterate that appropriate action must be taken against the individuals who are responsible for these tragic events. We also, in our letter, raised concerns on behalf of the country that Israel's initial responses suggest that the gravity of the death of 7 humanitarian workers is yet to be appreciated by the Israeli government. We also signalled our intention to appoint a special advisor to the Australian government on the investigation to ensure that the investigation is conducted in a manner consistent with not only the government's expectations, but the expectations of the Australian people. And we again made the point that an immediate humanitarian ceasefire leading to a sustainable ceasefire is urgently needed, a point we made overnight again in New York to the UN Security Council. If I can just take a step back and just remind us all where we are. On October the 7th, Hamas engaged in a terrorist act. Hamas is a terrorist organisation that is dedicated to the destruction of the State of Israel and to the Jewish people. They continue to hold hostages. Their actions were abhorrent, and we remain appalled by them. Since then, we have also made the point that Israel, in its response to those attacks, is bound by international humanitarian law. It is bound to observe the principles of international humanitarian law when it comes to seeking to protect civilians. It is bound to observe the principles of international humanitarian law in enabling the provision of aid. It is bound to observe the principles of international law in protecting the lives of aid workers. Demonstrably, that did not occur in relation to Zomi Frankcom and her World Central Kitchen colleagues. We again say we have a humanitarian catastrophe in Gaza. Humanitarian assistance at scale must be enabled, and it is clear that to date it has, prior to this, it has not been. Civilians, including humanitarian workers, must be protected. This incident demonstrates that has not been the case. We do acknowledge, since as a consequence of the meeting between Secretary Blinken and the Israeli government, there have been announcements to improve the flow of aid into Gaza. These are overdue, but they are welcome. And it is urgent that more aid be provided into Gaza. And we would again join others in the international community to call on Israel and all parties to ensure these commitments are implemented fast. On a separate point, can I acknowledge today the UN Secretary-General has appointed one of my predecessors, Julie Bishop, as a special envoy on Myanmar. This is welcome news for us. We obviously know Ms Bishop's experience and abilities and work ethic. We also know how serious the humanitarian, security and political situation is in Myanmar. I'm sure she will do an outstanding job, and we stand ready in the Australian Government to provide her with all support in this very important endeavour. happy to take questions.
You've expressed your dissatisfaction with the IDF's explanation of the airstrikes, the information that they've given you. What specifically does the government want to get out of the IDF?
Well, look, we've set out our expectations in the letter that has been provided that I've described to you. We want full accountability and transparency. We have asked the Israeli government to ensure that all evidence is preserved. We have said to them that if the investigation finds that Israeli Defence Force personnel have not acted in accordance with the law or IDF procedures, that appropriate action be taken against those personnel and that such action be made public. And that if the investigation determines that IDF targeting policies and practices have contributed, that urgent adjustments are made and communicated publicly. Australians expect confidence in this process. We are pressing the Israeli government to ensure the Australian people can have confidence in the process.
So on top of the information that has been presented by the IDF, what additional information is the government seeking?
Well, I've outlined what we've sought in the letter.
And does the Australian government have confidence that this investigation was sufficiently independent, given it was undertaken by former IDF officers?
Well, we've said that the actions that the Israeli government has taken to date were a necessary first step. We've not seen a written copy of those findings. We've been briefed through our ambassador, and I understand the media were briefed. But obviously what we want is full transparency and accountability, which is why the Deputy Prime Minister and I have written to our counterparts, setting out our expectations. It's also why the government will appoint a special advisor who we have requested the Israelis work with, so we can be advised about the appropriateness of the process. We want to have full confidence in the transparency and accountability of any investigation. We will continue to work to achieve that. Is there anyone else who would like a question? That'll be your fourth. So.
Hi, Minister. It's Isabel from 7 in Canberra.
Isabel, can I just finish in the room and then I will promise I will throw to you. Is that all right?
No problem.
Yeah, no worries. Sorry.
Is the dismissal of 2 officers and formal reprimanding of 3 senior commanders involved enough?
We want full accountability. These are necessary first steps. But as I've outlined, we set out our expectations in the letter, which go further than simply responding initially as the Israelis have. Did you have any question? No? Okay. Sorry, Isabel, you go.
Can you shed any light on those expectations that were outlined in the letter? What exactly does full accountability mean?
Well, what we have said in the letter is we expect all evidence to be preserved. We expect that if the investigation finds that IDF personnel have not acted in accordance with the law or procedures, that appropriate action be taken against those personnel and that such action be made public. We were concerned when we were first briefed that personnel had not been stood down, and I acknowledge that since then Israel has taken the necessary step of standing down some personnel. We have said that if the investigation determines that IDF targeting policies and practices have contributed, that urgent adjustments are made and communicated publicly. What does that mean? That means if there is a problem with the way in which the rules of engagement have been developed, if there is a problem with how they have been implemented, that is acknowledged and that changes are made. What I will say is this. We are engaging not only with the Israelis but with other countries because we want a process in which the international community, the Australian people and Zomi Frankcom's family can have confidence. That is what we will continue to do.
Have you been in touch with Zomi Frankcom's family after the release of these findings, and what was their reaction to the IDF explanation?
I spoke to Zomi's family before these findings were released to offer my condolences on behalf of my personal condolences and to express again the condolences of the community. I said to them that that we would ensure they were briefed and kept updated about what we were, the steps we were taking in relation to the investigation, and they have. We have made sure that they have been updated, and we will keep updating them.
Minister, your Polish counterpart has said there needs to be consideration of criminal liability here. Do you agree?
I think what I have said is that appropriate action has been taken. That's what we need to ensure, that appropriate action is taken.
Does that amount to criminal liability?
I'm not ruling anything in or out. That would be a question as to whether the facts merited that. And what I would say is appropriate action should be taken. The facts need to be ascertained, and once the facts are ascertained, appropriate action needs to be taken. I would again say what I've said before. Israel is bound by international humanitarian law.
Could you outline the scope of responsibilities for the special advisor that Australia will be?
We'll make a more detailed announcement of that in the very near future. But the thinking behind it and my discussions with my colleagues is it's appropriate for us to have a suitably qualified person to provide us with advice so that we can have confidence on behalf of the country in the process and to press for the appropriate process.
Have you received any confirmation that all evidence will be preserved as you've asked for?
I have not received as yet, unless my office is aware of it. I believe we've received a response to the letter as yet.
The UN Special Rapporteur has said, has called for immediate sanctions. What do you make of this in light?
This is Ms Albanese.
Yeah.
Well, I understand, you know, she made some comments immediately. I'm the Foreign Minister of this country and my job is to make sure we ensure that there is a proper process before I determine what accountability there should be.
Just on, did you have any other questions?
No, you can.
Isabel, are you right?
Sorry, just reconnecting. Just lastly, you've sort of touched on it, but are you realistically expecting full transparency when Israel is essentially investigating itself, even though you've got someone there to report back to the government?
Well, we are demanding that, and so are other countries. And what I would say to Israel, and I think they're perfectly aware of Australia's view on this and the view of many other countries, that our expectation is that there is full transparency. I mean, this cannot be swept aside. This can't be brushed aside. People have been raising concerns for some time about what is occurring in relation to humanitarian workers. This has been a deadly failure of deconfliction. Deconfliction is the process by which humanitarian agencies engage with defence forces to ensure that they are protected in conflict zones. Well, there was obviously a deadly failure. It cannot be brushed aside and it cannot be covered over, and I don't believe any Australian would expect us to do anything other than to continue to demand the transparency and accountability we have. Last question, please.
Just quickly on Myanmar, the UN has described fighting there as reaching an unprecedented level of violence. Do you think Julie Bishop's recent appointment, do you think she'll be able to cut through progress?
I'm not going to make what is already a challenging job even harder by setting expectations for Julie to be able to, ensure peace where we have not been able to attain peace for some time in Myanmar. But I know that she is an effective diplomat. I know that the only way forward in Myanmar is for there to be a peace process between the parties, a dialogue between the parties. I know that there has been massive loss of life and the targeting of civilians, and we've made our views on that clear. What I would say is I hope that this appointment will allow there to be space for a discussion which leads to a lessening of violence and the finding of peace. Thanks very much for coming in.